But in spite of that, in Deir Yessin, the almonds survived.
Welcome everyone to Bent Fig Media. My name is Yashar Shayan, and I have with me today Hanna Eady of Dunya Productions, a local theater company here in Seattle. Welcome, Hanna. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Thank you for joining us. So, I know you have a play coming up soon, so that's going to be the focus of our show. But let's start with a little bit of background about yourself. Tell us who you are and what's your story.
I'm a Palestinian. I grew up in Palestine in what it's called Israel now, the proper, not the West Bank, not Gaza, but the Upper Galilee, which is the north part of Palestine, very close to Lebanon. Um, and I came to the U.S. in 1980, just before Israel invaded Lebanon, seeking education. I wanted to study theater because back home in Palestine, in my own native village, um, I did some theater, not knowing much about theater, not studying theater. A village where we had no running water, no electricity. So the only form of entertainment in the village was festivals and weddings and um, mostly it's a unique village in a way. We have Greek Orthodox, Catholics, Muslims, Druze, and an old Jewish community that lived in the village in harmony with us until 1948, when Israel was established. And the culture was a mixed culture. Um, we all celebrated um, the holidays and the festival. The biggest festival was Easter festival. Christmas was nothing. um, and that's the time when we would put on a play at the village square, right by the spring, where the village was established around the spring. And I was young, and I did it right at the village square. And sure enough, the next day I was walking down the square, and little kids would be chasing me, um, shooting at me some of the punchlines from the play. And I think that did an impact on me. I think I realized then that there's some power in doing theater. And I never stopped since that day. That was early 70s. And then I left the village to the city of Haifa, where I joined the University of Haifa. I was studying psychology, and I joined a professional theater company. And at the time, I was very thirsty and eager to know about theater, to study theater. So I came to the US and to the University of Wisconsin, believe it or not knowing much about where I was going. But I wanted to stay by a beach, and I think Milwaukee was right on the beach of Lake Michigan.
Nice.
Um, and after that, graduate school, I came to the University of Washington here in Seattle and started a new company, the New Image Theater, doing political theater, basically educating the American public about the Middle East, right about the first Gulf War in 1991, and then on, and now I'm in Dunya Productions.
How was that received when you say when you started a theater company during the Gulf War, educating Americans about the Middle East? Was there a big audience for that kind of work at the time?
Believe it or not, I think Seattle at the time, to me, it seemed like a naive city, or I would rather call Seattle a city with a heart. Um, I don't know if you remember the first Gulf War in 1991. The biggest anti-war demonstration came out of St. Mark's Cathedral on Capitol Hill, and I think the Seattle audience was very eager to know. I know the Elliott Bay bookstore was down on Pioneer Square, and at the time they ran out of books about the Middle East. Everybody wanted to know not just where Iraq was on the map, but what's this Middle East thing? And that's when I realized that there's so much um, to tell. So I did a play about Palestine right after the first Intifada, and I did Seeing Double, which is a comedy, a farce about Palestine, and then obviously the Bosnian crisis in '93. I did Bosna Moja, a play about Bosnia, stories that I collected from refugees who survived um, the war in Bosnia and ended up in Seattle. So I collected those stories from them, and I basically put it on stage at the Theater of Jackson. And yeah, I think the answer is Seattle is not it's not in Canada. It's not a Canadian city. And at the time when I was doing work at the New Image Theater, Seattle was known to have at least, I want to say 10 or even more non-equity theaters, small theater companies that survived. Unfortunately, and sad enough now to say they're mostly gone, um, the small ones.
When you say non-equity theaters, I believe equity is the labor union for theater workers. Is that correct?
Yes,
So they were
yes,
so small that that they kind of went under the radar in terms of not being
yeah,
known.
exactly.
Yeah, which in theory I think gives you a little bit more room to play and a little more freedom to be experimental.
Yeah, and you can hire non-equity actors,
Yeah.
um, which a lot of talented actors who just don't belong to the union or can't afford the membership.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people of color and Middle Eastern actors, immigrants would
Yeah,
probably be less likely to be in the union, especially at that time. I don't know if that's changed, but especially when you talk about affordability and access, then I imagine people who might be marginalized would have less access to a union.
yes.
And do you feel like it's changed at all in the Seattle scene in terms of the interest in this kind of theater, Middle Eastern themed theater? Is there more interest, less interest?
I think there's more. To be honest with you, even the big companies, including Seattle Rep and ACT, um, found a way to produce something about the Middle East. Um, we all know that the play My Name is Rachel Corrie was canceled on the East Coast in New York, um, and the Seattle Rep welcomed it and opened here in Seattle. Um, ACT did a play about the Middle East. Not that it's my favorite play. It's called Oslo. Um, we actually didn't like it, and we told them that it's not a good play, but at least they were trying. Um, and I also know that a play that I co-written with Ed Mast that Dunya ended up producing last year, The Return, was offered by our agent to ACT, and at the time, I want to say this is 2014 or 15, after the U.S. premiere on the East Coast in D.C., the literary manager of ACT read the play and wrote back to the agent saying, "Wow, what a play! I read it on the edge of my seat." But so they were still hesitating because they thought it was the politics of the play, not that it's a political play. It's really a human story, a universal story. They still couldn't withstand the pressure from the pro-Israeli um, side, and they decided not to produce it. But then they produced Oslo, obviously, um, which to not to my liking at all. And I believe it's I think it's a movie now.
Hmm.
I can't remember if it's out or not, but but it might be. Anyway, I think it is changing. It is changing. I know a friend of mine, Yusuf Al-Gindi, who's an Egyptian playwright. He has a lot of his plays produced. I don't know how much he is that close to calling his plays political plays, but they are about his culture, his Egyptian culture and Middle Eastern culture. Um, and once you go out of Seattle, if you want to go to the East Coast, DC and New York. New York actually just produced The Mulberry Tree, a play by myself and Ed Mast at the La Mama Theater, and they are
Wow.
rehearsing. They are rehearsing as we speak for a second run.
That's amazing that the plays at La Mama. I feel like that's a respected
Yes,
house.
yeah, and uh, and the return after we produced it last year here in Seattle, it was picked up by five European countries. Let's see if I can get them right. Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, and another Norwegian country. I think they're in the process of translating it to their language right now. And it's on the schedule for 25, 2025 season at the Golden Thread Theater in San Francisco.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah, and I feel like especially for contemporary theaters in cities like Seattle in the US, usually a part of their mission is to kind of push the boundaries and have bold stories. I'm kind of surprised that ACT Theater in Seattle wouldn't do that. I'm literally looking at their mission statement on their website now, and it says, "I see artistic ambition, civic engagement, theater that expands our collective understanding of community and humanity." And to not do these plays because they thought they were too bold. Um, but hey, what can you do? A lot of these theaters are under new management, including ACT. So who knows? Maybe it's a whole new, braver world in theater. I hope we can be as brave as we want to be, especially when it comes to theater, because I think that's the language of dissidence and perseverance. Usually, I mean, that sounds like that's in part how you discovered theater and writing yourself.
Yeah.
So let's get into the play that you have coming up.
Yes. Almonds Blossom in Deir Yessin. Well, it's interesting because the word Deir Yassin, the name Deir Yassin for a Palestinian is almost uh, it comes with a shiver. I grew up in a house where if my grandma is talking about pre-Nakba or up to the Nakba in 1948, if she would mention the name Deir Yassin, my grandfather would tell her to stop and hush. The word Deir Yassin is a scary word. It comes with a lot of fear, a lot of trauma. Um, a lot of Palestinians actually ended up packing and leaving their homes because of they heard of what happened in Deir Yassin. Um, and then obviously, the minute my grandfather would leave the room, then my grandma would say, well, they did this and they did that. Um, Obviously, the story of survivors in a massacre or in any war crime who would tell the story of what happened. The people who did not survive, obviously, we never hear from them. And in my opinion, there were two survivors in that massacre. Deir Yassin massacre. The Palestinians who survived and put on a truck and dumped across the border in Jordan, and the people who committed the crime, the commander and his soldiers. They survived. They all survived. And they lived a long life. In fact, the commander of the massacre just died a few years ago at an older age, almost 93, um, stating with a lot of pride never regretted what he did, saying if we would have committed 3 or 4 Deir Yassin, no Palestinian would have stayed in the country and lived a long life. So to me, Deir Yassin was always a name hovering over my brain that what is it? I don't have the details. The the survivors told us some of the details, but the real facts, the real story of what actually took place is hidden in the IDF archive, in underground archive that the Israelis are storing all the facts, all the secrets, the whole plan, including photos, because they had a person in charge of the Haganah, what they call um, uh, the unit that committed the crime, who came the next day and took photographs. And those photos are in the archive, in the Israeli archive. And it was about to be opened. And I believe in 2005, Netanyahu decided to close the archive for another 50 years. So we're not going to be able to find out what's in the archive or what's hidden for another 50 years. And so how I arrived to this as a play is I was picking on my imagination. What could they be hiding in the archive? And if it's nothing, why are they really locking it for nobody to see? So that's where my imagination went. And then I realized that in fact, if you go to visit the site of the village today, Deir Yassin, the Israelis have a mental institution built on the side of the village. So my play, right away, was sprouted from a commanding image that came to me, which is I'm taking the the man who committed the crime and commanded the massacre, and I put him in that hospital, and let the story come out of the ground. So this is where the play begins, and it has a lot to do with whether he can actually continue to deny and continue to rebury the truth, because he's really very proud of what happened. He never said I didn't do it, but he's saying I did it, so what? Um, and facing what Mahmoud Darwish would call the living ghost of the Palestinians. If they would come out of the ground, what would happen? How would he face the Palestinian memory that is just resisting erasement and continue to survive after 75 years, 76 years? So this is where the action of the play takes place, really, on the site of the massacre of Deir Yassin. And Almonds Blossom. Almond is a very symbolic um, um, thing in Palestinian writing and poetry. The blossom itself is so beautiful, is so pure white like snow with a red heart at the center. And if you go to visit the site of Deir Yassin now, you will see almond trees, you see carob trees, you see olive trees, all under struggling to survive the European native pine trees that the Israelis planted over the village. So pine trees is not a Palestinian tree. They brought it from Europe, and it's planted almost on the side of every destroyed village in Palestine. So the almond itself is just a symbol of surviving and also a symbol of resistance, refusing to die after all these years.
Wow, that's incredible. Like that's very evocative in terms of just mental images. I feel like I can see the trees struggling to survive in that environment. Yeah, that's beautiful and haunting, I suppose.
Yeah, especially when you find out from experts about the pine trees that they are not just tall and monstrous, but they don't let anything grow under them.
Mm.
So how under the pine trees there's just nothing. It's one way. I heard it from from an expert on trees here, in a friend of mine from Indianola, saying that that's one way to kill the brush under. So if there's a fire, it would never get to the tree. But in spite of that, in Deir Yessin, the almonds survived under the pine.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I think anybody who has lived in the Northwest for a long time and had a pine tree in their backyard, they can attest to the fact that grass does not grow underneath or grows very
Yes.
patchy. And I
Mhm.
remember it might have been Cisco, the gardening with Cisco. I think I remember a segment where he said, "You will never grow grass under your trees. Stop trying. Just
Yeah.
accept it." So I've definitely heard that myself, and as someone who had to water the grass as a kid, can attest to the fact that I was not able to water that grass enough to
Yeah.
get it to grow under the pine trees. Fascinating. Um, do you feel like there are any particular challenges with presenting a play like this, whether it's in Seattle or in this political environment, or even just production challenges as a smaller playhouse production company in the Northwest?
Yeah. I mean, the first challenge was really try to cast the play. It's it's not easy to find Middle Eastern actors, to be honest with you. There are very few. Uh, uh, Unfortunately, they are mostly on the East Coast. Um, but we were almost, ready to say, okay, well, let's fundraise and bring somebody from New York. Um, but we were lucky to find finally an actress here and to play the part, uh, because the play is about Palestine, but really the only character that is a Palestinian is the character that is representing the Palestinian memory. She is real and not real. She's a ghost, but she manages to break theater convention at the end and actually come to life as a real person who survived the massacre. Um, and then the other actors were from here, local. So they're all local, but we were really happy to find a Palestinian woman to play the part. So the challenge that was the first challenge. It took a while. Actually, we kind of almost postponed the opening of the play because of it. But we were lucky to find the cast. The other challenge is really once we open, once we actually uh, invite the audience to view it, um, we will uh, be almost forced to keep the forum open after the play. In other words, they will come and see the play, but they will have questions. They will have maybe um, unhappy comments, or maybe happy. Obviously, some. I hope people are going to be, praising the show, but I know when people come from um, the pro-Israeli side, or even just the Jewish community, which is, a respectful Jewish community, they probably will hear things for the first time. Some of them maybe heard the name Deir Yassin, not like any Palestinian, you know, we all know what Deir Yassin is, but a lot of the people from the Jewish community have no idea, or at least have no idea what happened. Um, or it would, or they heard Israeli myths, just we had to kill to survive, or they forced us to kill, like what Golda Meir would say. Um, so that's a challenge, and I think we've done something similar during the return, which is uh, a talk back after the show to just let people, say whatever they want to say, whether it's a question or a comment, to just give him the space, give him the room um, to vent. And so that's another challenge. It's a lot of work, but we should do it. Um, and and I just hope that we don't get into a situation where we had to restore order or watch for troublemakers. We were worried about that during the return, and fortunately, nothing happened. We were sold out every night. We had to extend the show because a lot of people, didn't get a chance to see it during the run, and we thought we would have to, de-escalate some situations, um, at least at the door or outside the door, but none of that happened. So hopefully, none of that would happen this time.
Good. I mean, yeah, I think again, theater in theory, we go to theater to expand our perspectives, and I think discomfort can be part of that. If we really truly want to educate ourselves, discomfort, I think, should be anticipated to some degree. Hopefully, we don't feel unsafe, but feeling a bit out of our element should be natural. And I think when we are exploring our own histories and the histories of other people, those of us who came here to the US from other places, we came here because, in theory, this is a place where different opinions are allowed. People are not supposed to be persecuted or physically attacked for different perspectives and different beliefs. So hopefully we can be civil, even if
Yeah.
if you see a show you don't agree with, that's okay. Sometimes I see shows I just don't like, and it happens. We can't like everything. I'm okay with that. So I hope audiences can feel that way too. That it's okay if you don't like it, and even if you hate it. That's how theater goes. It's especially when it's meant to be edgy, and I think edgy is part of the fun of it, personally.
Yeah, to be honest with you, even I mentioned my first play in the village. The it's actually called the title in Arabic, "Fan wa siyasi," which is art and politics, because I just, as a young kid, almost wanted to criticize um, the treatment of the school teachers to the students, the local council, um, lack of responsibility and projects developing the village, taking care of the village. It was all, a political farce, a comedy, just making fun of all these people up in high places. And I don't think I never stopped. So my theater is has sharp edges. So if you come to see the play and you expect to melt in some elusive mist in a dark seat, that's not my theater, honestly. You're going to be awake, um, and you're going to be questioned, and you're going to feel responsible, and you're going to feel the little edges because the truth will be told maybe 2, 3 meters away from you where you're sitting on stage.
Very good. Sounds like you've been speaking truth to power for quite a long time.
Yeah.
I respect that. I think some people say the appreciation of satire is dead. I don't know if it was ever thriving. Satire itself has been around for a long time,
Yeah.
and using that as a way to um, draw attention to injustices or bad politics certainly has been around for a long time. But as the idea of a court jester goes, that the king often doesn't know that he's being made fun of. And that's perhaps part of the trick, I guess. That's how the court jester survives to satirize another day, I guess. I
Yeah.
guess maybe that's inherent in a shortcoming of the king. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
If the king is not happy, that's a good thing. So I remember at the University of Washington in one of the directing seminars, I was sitting with directing students from year one, year two, there were like six of us, two from every year, and one of my friends was trying to present a play. I think he called it a feminist play, which is, he was defining it as a political theater. And I remember the the professor asked, "So what is a political theater?" And so we struggled for a couple of hours trying to define political theater. What is political? And then he turned to me and said, "Hanna, so what is political theater?" I said, "Well, you know what? I don't care what you say in your play and what the play is about. If your theater gets closed by the government the next day you open your show, your play is political. If you're upsetting the king, your play is political. Even if it's just a comedy, the king doesn't like people laughing, not too much. He's gonna come and close your theater.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. And I think it's relatable. Tell us where how do people get tickets? Is Dunya selling tickets for Almond Blossom directly or is it through a different website?
So you can get tickets at dunyaproductions.org.
And how do you spell Dunya?
Dunya, Dunya, Productions with an S.
And how did you and your cohorts come up with the name for the company?
I actually was sitting in the kitchen with my daughter, Jenna, and I said, what is your favorite name in Arabic? My kids grew up here in the US. They know they have a lot of friends back home in Palestine. And she said, my best friend in Palestine, her name is Dunya. And I love that word, which means the world, by the way, Dunya. So I said, that's it. We're going to suggest to the committee, to the members of our company. At the time, we weren't really a company yet. I was just assembling um, people who were interested in creating such company. And I said Dunya, and they bought it.
Excellent. And my understanding is the people involved in Dunya Productions do come from all over the world, all over them from the Middle East, but beyond as well. It's not Palestinians only, right?
Yes, they're Egypt, uh, Jordan, Lebanon. Um, we also have just white American. Edward Mass has been a friend of mine, co-writing with me for many many years. And Jen Marlowe from Donkey Saddle, and Beth Mahmoud is also has been working with me for many years as a stage manager and a production manager for a lot of projects. And George Cassis, Will Hanna, and Manal. Yeah, we're from the Middle East, because we are, a MENA company, in Middle East and North Africa.
Excellent. Sounds like, yeah, you have a lot of great people involved. That's fantastic. Is there anything else that you think is important to share about Dunya Productions or the upcoming play Almonds Blossom in Deir Yessin? Yessin?
Well, the only urgent thing for people who are gonna watch this or hear this, is that we um, ended up canceling our fundraiser for the production because of what's going on in Gaza. Because we thought the play, um, well, the reason why there is Gaza because there was Deir Yassin. We really think that it hasn't stopped. Just like we talk about Deir Yassin now after 75 years, people are going to be talking about Gaza for more than 75 years. It's a horrible situation. So we canceled because we felt like our people, our community was exhausted, um, giving to Gaza and Lebanon and now Syria. So we thought we don't want to take away from them. Um, so we ended up shorthanded on the budget. So if there's any way that can, be made up now by even a small donation to Dunya, because our budget grew as the play grew. The play is a full scale production, a lot of video, a lot of lights, a lot of sound, a lot of music, not just actors on stage, and it's very costly because we had to build a theater really. Chair Street Village, the building itself, we took over a gymnasium that not a performance space, and right now it's a theater space. We put so much time and so much money in it, And so we're building a theater to do a play, and somehow the building of the theater just took all of our energy and all of our resources. So we are a little short-handed on the production itself. So we're hoping that either by ticket sale or by small contribution from the community, we would be fine by the end of March.
And I'm looking at the website, dunyaproductions.org right now, and I see at the top bar there is a donate button for anyone who's interested, who might want to make a contribution.
Yeah.
Looks like that is an easy way to access an opportunity to make a donation. So hopefully people will do that.
Yeah.
I think of how historically, I wish it weren't the case, but historically, art that is often most revered is art that is made during difficult times. We think of dissident art, whether it's in the USSR or in China, in the US, in Iran, my own home country, and I think all over the world. When there's difficulty, when it's difficult to make art, whether because it's outlawed or because the resources are not available, some of the most beautiful art comes through, or the most unique, because I guess like the almond blossoms in Deir Yessin, they are working under constraint and under a difficult situation, and that makes it all that much more special, I think. So maybe 50 years from now, people will be talking about what you did here and the art that you created during this challenging time.
Very, very, very true. Yeah. It's we even with the last year production, because we cast the play, we had a schedule, and then the war started October 7th, and we were debating whether to do the show or cancel. And we got together as members of Dunya, and we decided it's the right time. Everybody would ask me. I said, "This is exactly why we're doing the play." And it's the same thing with this production, right? We could have just canceled because we don't have the money, but if not now, when? Look what's going on in Palestine. I mean, if we have to cancel just because of money, I mean, I can do it on the street for nothing, or do it in a parking lot, but it's very timely. And as long as the Palestinian people are not free, and not living in equality, and not living a decent life in Palestine, uh, we shall go on with such thing. I wish I always say this to my kids. Why aren't we just Norwegian, or born in Iceland or something? Why are we Palestinian? Look at us. It's been such a long wait for us to get free, to get just to breathe. And I wish I don't have to do this. Maybe just Moliere, or just comedy, or commedia dell'arte. Just stand and wear a mask and just jump up and down and make fun of somebody else. but it's very timely. If there's no way to wait, and this is resistance in a very soft way. I mean, I never held a gun in my life, but this is very powerful, and it's time to tell the world. I really think, um, living in the U.S., not living in Palestine, gives me a different responsibility. Maybe in Palestine, I would be just, sit back and let it happen and watch it happen. But I'm here. Um, and as long as I'm not picked up and thrown in prison, I will continue to do this. This is the right time and the right place.
Great. Yeah. And I think to what you said about this is a kind of resistance and that you've not held a gun, I think there are all different kinds, all different parts to play.
Yep.
It's not just war. Everyone has a different way that they can contribute, and I think they can all be meaningful. There are different meaningful ways. Yeah. So that's wonderful. I'm glad that you're doing this. I have looked up the massacre at Deir Yessin in the last several months after hearing about Almonds Blossom. I was previously unaware of it. I mean, in general, I certainly remember we didn't study Israel Palestine much in school. If we did, I don't know that it was a fair and balanced education. I certainly remember coming out of high school thinking very differently than I do now in terms of my understanding of what the situation is. And it wasn't until college where, college is often seen as a place where people expand their minds and meet protesters and dissidents and whatnot. And yeah, it wasn't until college that I saw people talking about freeing Palestine, and I had no concept of such a thing until I saw people standing in the courtyard at the University of Washington holding signs that said "Free Palestine." I had no idea if Palestine wasn't free. No one had educated me on this as a teenager, as a young adult. So I ended up striking a conversation with that person just out of curiosity and
Yeah.
was surprised. So yeah, hopefully this can teach something new to other people as well. And of course, now we live in the internet age. Like I said, I've been Googling Deir Yessin. I'm sure others will too. And I know that whenever there's turmoil in the Middle East, the news reports that people are Googling, where is Iraq? Where is Afghanistan? What is Palestine?
Yeah.
Hopefully we become more educated throughout time. It's tough to say. Anything else you'd like to share with us tonight, Hanna?
Um, that'd be it. Just come see the play.
Great. Yeah, I hope people will. I think it sounds wonderful. Sounds like a wonderful play, even if it is a difficult subject matter. Well, I believe in addition to going to dunyaproductions.com, Dunya is active on Instagram at Dunya Productions. So
Yeah.
there's two ways we can find and interact with Dunya. Look for tickets, make donations, like, subscribe, reshare, tell your friends as one does on social media. So again, Almonds Blossom in Deir Yessin by Hanna Eady and Dunya Productions, February 21st through March 15th. I'm looking forward to it. And it sounds like based on some of the other productions you've done, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets picked up by respected theaters around the country, perhaps even outside the country. So, this is people's chance to get in on the ground floor before it becomes big. If you're regretting not seeing Hamilton before it became big and the tickets became $500, learn from that lesson. Get tickets for Almonds Blossom before it becomes big and the tickets become $500. Um, don't miss out. Thank you so much, Hanna, for chatting with me tonight. It's been a pleasure. I'm sure we'll have you and perhaps other members of Dunya back on another time to talk more about Dunya and what else you might have going on later this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.